the people that are pushing anti-transness the most, it's going to lead to more people questioning their gender and how they do it.
I look at Elon Musk like waving around a chainsaw that is off.
It was off.
It was off.
That's very weird.
Look what happens when Elon Musk fails at gender and gets mad.
Hey, Sam Sanders here. Thank you so much for checking out my show, a show about entertainment. And I'm so happy this week to have a guest on who made a thing that I found so entertaining that I stayed up into the wee hours of the morning on more than one night to finish her book. This never happens to me. I like my sleep. I can put a book down. Not so with this one. I've been telling my friends that this book is the weirdest thing I've read in years, and I mean it so positively. Without further ado, I want my guest to tell folks who she is and what this book is. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Torrey Peters. I'm the author of this weirdo book in question. It's called Stag Dance.
I got it right here.
Yeah.
Great cover. Stag Dance. We love it.
It is if you can get, I don't know if the tongue will show up on the picture, but that tongue is grotesque. Yeah, so it's 4 pieces. It's like a quartet, and each is in a different genre. There's speculative fiction, teen romance, kind of a tall tale Western, and finally horror. And each one kind of takes on a different experience of kind of being gendered in the world.
Yeah. No, yeah. I love it. It's so strange. The language is strange. The characters are strange. The plot is strange. Even though you say only one of the stories is horror, I feel like 2 of them could qualify.
Yeah, I mean, and in a certain way, all of them have like, like grotesque, but I actually think that's like kind of the experience of walking around in the world. You're like, everything is a little bit absurd, and there's a sheen of horror over it. Yeah.
There's a line. I'm going to skip around, but there's a line that I want to say the New York Times wrote about your writing. What did they say? They said, quote, "A great Torrey Peters story feels like punching yourself in the face, laughing at the bleeding bitch in the mirror, and then shamefacedly realizing you're aroused by the blood on your lips."
I could not believe that was in the New York Times. Like, I was kind of like, who was the style editor who let them like say bitch, but not just like a normal bitch, it's like a highly inflected bitch. Like, looking at the bitch in the mirror, It was like, wow.
And you're the bitch in the mirror.
It was New York Times, look at you go.
Yeah. You've developed this reputation for writing things that are purposefully very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Do you like that?
I think I do. I think, I think that actually writing things that are uncomfortable is also oftentimes writing things that are true,
That part.
And there's something that like when you write things that are uncomfortable, you get behind people's kind of, the sort of armor that I think people have. Like, I write about trans issues, and everybody has opinions about transness. And so it's like, if I go in just being like, let's talk about transness with
it's loaded. It's fraught with all the politics and everything.
And there's just a discourse and there's a thing, and people are like, I know already what I think.
Yes.
And I'm not.
And I'm in this box and I'm in that box, and here's my talking points.
And I'm not going to convince anybody. And I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
But if I can kind of like go around like through the side door of like just like kind of feeling weird, and people are like, oh, I had some feelings. And I don't know what to call these feelings. And now let me try and like make sense of those feelings.
Exactly.
Then they're like oftentimes like kind of constructing something where they're like, where they're coming up with an idea, an argument that isn't one that was given to them. They're doing it themselves because it's like emotion first instead of kind of intellectualizing something and then deciding how you feel because you have a kind of approach ready made for you.
Yeah.
So for me, like, one of the easiest ways to get people to actually think about things, and not just get people, but myself, is that like when I'm uncomfortable, I'm oftentimes like, why do I feel that way?
Yeah. And you have to find new language to describe the discomfort.
Exactly.
And it takes you out of your talking points.
Yeah, that's very well said. Thank you for
I love
thank you for doing that for me.
I want to talk about the book because it is just so beautifully strange. But before we dig into that, I just have to ask you what it's like to be you putting a book out right now in America. So much of the release of this book feels like it should be a victory lap for you. Your last novel was critically acclaimed and almost instantly made you one of America's preeminent trans writers. The book even ended up on the New York Times list of the best 100 books. Was it of all time or 21st
The
century?
21st century.
Okay.
I would love it if it was all time. Like,
But
take
it's
that,
pretty
Garcia
great.
Marquez. You know? Bumped
But
you from the list.
but you have this great run, critical acclaim, and the early reviews on this new book, Stag Dance, are also full of acclaim. But this book, like the last one, is a meditation on transness. And I just keep thinking, it's like, how do you celebrate that and live in that moment, knowing that transness and trans people are currently America's biggest political football? Like, can you victory lap in the midst of that?
I can.
Okay. Yes.
End of question. No,
Yeah.
I do feel that that there is a moment of victory, and it's a little bit different than the first time. Like the first time when that book came out, I was one of only a couple of trans people like on a major press.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I was asked to kind of represent all trans people.
I remember that dialogue around it because I had you on to talk about the book, and everything around it was like, this book is really good, and she's the one.
Right.
She's the one.
And that was like a lot of pressure, and it was not particularly fun for me.
Huh.
Like, even though it was like, in some ways, a high watermark of trans rights.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't there with like kind of everyone else.
Yeah.
And, you know, this spring, I think there's 15, maybe 20 trans writers with books.
That's great.
On presses coming out this spring. Like, and a bunch of my friends, a bunch of my people I'm just starting to meet or know. Some of them I haven't met. But it means that, like, in a certain way, I'm not representing anymore. Like, this, as you say, it's a weird book, right? So, like, I get to actually pursue my, like, idiosyncrasies, my interests.
Without thinking about representation.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a kind of freedom, actually, in this moment, artistically, as a trans artist, that I'm surrounded by other people. I can point to them, and we're doing something. Like, it's kind of a moment, even though there's a lot of repression, and that the repression is in a weird way a kind of opportunity. Like, they made it like, if you had asked me, like, what's going to be like the big thing that everybody wants, Donald Trump or whoever else wants to talk about in 2025, I would not have been like trans people. You know?
I wouldn't either, because it's like 1% of the population.
Yeah.
And mostly folks just minding their own business.
Absolutely. It's like, I don't want to be at the center of policy, but it's like, if you make me the center of your like policy for not just like gender, but for everything. Yeah. You know, he's talking to the Polish president about transgender, and it's like, why are you doing that? You know, I have nothing to do with Poland.
Like, why am I in it?
So, but it's like, if you do that, then it's actually like, there's going to be attention on us. And now there are many of us. And I think that there are people who are like, well, let's see what there is.
Let's see what it's about.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think we make better art. I think we have better stories. And so, you know, this is a difficult moment, like day to day. Yeah. But I think, you know, I have kind of faith in myself, and I also have faith in so many other like trans artists, and to kind of like be like, well, we're going to do something with this attention, you know, and I'm trying to basically see it as a moment of possibility, instead of, even as it's like a moment where, like, you know, day to day, you're like, this is messed up. Yeah. In a larger scale, I hope we can be able to look back on it and be like, this was actually a time of flourishing. Yeah.
You know what you need to happen?
Yeah.
You need conservatives to start to ban your book. Then it would sell like crazy.
Well, for Detransition Baby, it was like when a bunch of transphobes and bigots wrote a weird letter pretending to be dead women authors.
What?
Oh, this was wild.
Wait, tell me what happened.
This is in the UK. Okay. They wrote a letter pretending to be like, you know, Emily Dickinson and George Eliot, which is a very ironic choice. But they were basically like, we, the dead authors, condemn Torrey Peters for having been nominated for the Women's Prize, because I was nominated for the Women's Prize. And it was so like out there. Yeah. And it got picked up by, like, you know, mostly conservative outlets like the Daily Mail, you know, kind of published it. And people were kind of like, this is weird. obviously.
Yeah.
Why aren't people just signing it with their own names? Because they were actually like
anonymous.
Yeah, but they claimed to be famous female authors. I don't know who they were.
Might have been men.
I mean, it could have been anybody.
It could be anybody.
It could be just someone in their basement being like, I'm a famous female author. And it's like, sure you are, But it created such a weird moment that my book was not on any bestseller lists in the UK at that time. A week later, it was number 5 on the Times bestseller list.
Stop.
So it's like, I kind of am a little bit like, all right,
all press is good press, baby.
Go ahead. Like I was like, terrified at the time. I was like, well, this is the end of my career, but Emily Dickinson doesn't like me. So, but now I'm a little bit like, well, there's ways in which, talking about it all the time makes people curious. Where they're like, if you're like trans all the time, people, somebody at home is like, what is this trans?
My whole theory about all of this is like, the people that are pushing anti-transness the most are actually leading all of American culture towards a greater reckoning of the performance of gender.
Yeah.
And it's going to lead to more people, not less, questioning their gender and how they do it. That's what's happening.
I think that the people doing it are like, kind of like, I'm like seeing them and I'm like, you've got gender issues. Like, I see
it's very like, don't think of an elephant.
Yeah.
All I'm thinking about now is an elephant.
I look at Elon Musk like waving around a chainsaw that is off, and
I'm like,
off. It was
That's
off.
Very weird.
It was like, your chainsaw is off, sir.
What a metaphor.
And it was like, and you're supposed to obviously see that and be like, wow, what a rugged man with his chainsaw. But instead, you're sort of like, ooh,
what's going on here?
That's kind of a gender fail, Yeah. And it's like, and that actually, that feeling of like, oh, I want to be seen this way, and nobody's seeing me this way.
Isn't that the trans experience?
That's the trans experience. And it makes you mad when you're not seen the way you want to see.
So now you feel how I feel.
And look what happens when Elon Musk fails at gender and gets mad. It's like, oh, look, you're having a very trans experience, Elon Musk. And like, I mean, this to me is like it's creating a lot of opportunities for the kind of lens that we're talking about. And people are, I mean, I don't want to extrapolate too much about that, but I look at that kind of performance and I'm like, you seem like you're maybe in like a little bit of pain. And if you could have some language to like put words to this, might help you out.
I want to talk about the language you used in that answer and the conceptualization of transness that is all across this book. You talk about a trans experience.
Yeah.
And not so much being trans or not being trans, but experiencing emotions and thoughts that are trans.
Yeah.
That blew my mind because I never thought about it that way before. But once I read it in the book and in your foreword, I was like, oh, at a certain point in our lives, the angst over how the world sees us has us embodying transness.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's very well said. I think that if you look at this book, there's maybe 4 characters who are like, I am trans.
Yeah. And most of the characters, the lead characters, are not.
They're just having weird feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that like the kind of, when people think about transness, oftentimes the like binary that they think is being investigated is like the binary between male and female.
Yes.
And for me, that's fine. It's, work can be done in that. But what's interesting to me is like that binary between cis and trans. Like at what point does somebody become trans? What makes somebody trans? And that like when I actually think about what the feelings that I'm like, these are the feelings that make me trans, there are things like the way that my desire manifests. There are things like the gap between how I want the world to see me and how I feel.
Yeah.
That the negotiations that I'm always having with the world around this kind of thing. And that's not unique to transness.
There you go. Everyone's had the experience of looking in a mirror and not wanting to see what's there.
Right. And having to do work to make yourself how you want to be seen.
Yep.
Like the work of doing it is significant. And I'm not the only one out there doing work.
There you go.
Like everybody every day when they get up in the morning, they're like, this is how I want to be seen. I want to be seen as a woman in this way. And, you do your hair, you do all these different things.
All the men at the gym, they're
exactly.
performing gender.
Totally. It's happening all around us all the time. And what I think is like, let's recognize those building blocks of transness. And instead of sort of talking about transness as oh, that's trans people over there. They're other. I could never understand their experience, which I think has been actually, trans people have been saying that for a while, where it's like, you could never understand us. You could never understand. I'm kind of like, actually, it's very easy to understand us because you're already doing what we do.
Yes.
And then I think transness becomes a kind of like, not like an invitation to like join a group, but an invitation to kind of see things the way that we see things.
And
interrogate it, and also like come to like an understanding of yourself, like have some peace about it, like we're all doing it, it's fine, nobody's failing, or we're all failing, and either way it's fine.
Yeah. Well, and it's so counter to the ways in which the culture has defined transness for so long. It's you are or you aren't, and you declare it and perform it, and that's that. You got the surgery, you're on the meds, you changed your pronouns, you're wearing this now, and it's done. It is very much like a bar mitzvah. I've done the thing, and now I'm the that.
Exactly.
Whereas your idea of transness as a series of questions one asks themselves, that is incredibly more nuanced, nebulous, and harder to escape or deny. Because we've all been there at some point.
And I think there's also like that first way, I understand why it kind of happens, but I think there's a kind of like expected degree of certainty that's unreasonable.
Exactly.
Like certainty almost gets weaponized, where you ask people like, are you certain? Are you sure? And unless you're like, I am 100% sure, I will never have any regrets, I will never do anything, then it's like, oh, are you really though? Are you really? And I think that like, that's actually like not an adult way to do anything.
Okay.
Like to basically ask people to be like, are you sure? Are you 100? Like that's how you talk to children. Like, do you really want this? Like, are you sure you're gonna be able to, we're gonna have to stop the car for you, you know? It's like, no, actually I'm not sure. And that's fine because I'm an adult and I make choices and I actually am able to like deal with regret.
Yes.
You know?
Well, it's wild to hear you say that because the entire first novel is about detransition. And questioning all of it.
Which, like I think it's fine to detransition. Like I think it's okay. The idea that like if you detransition, you're some sort of monster is not only horrible for trans people, it's horrible for everybody else.
Exactly.
Because the people who detransition, it's like you are kind of regret embodied in a person. Like what a horrible way to feel. And two, it also like stops anybody from playing around because it's like, oh, you might regret what you're doing.
Static.
And like people join the military, people ride motorcycles. It's like we're doing things that we could regret all the time. And I think it's interesting that like with this kind of thing, it's like, no, this kind of regret.
This one has to be,
you can't possibly do it.
Which is wild because so many other aspects of queerness are incredibly and always negotiable. Everyone can just like become bi one day. Everyone can just be like, I used to like this, now I like that. And everyone's like, oh, I get it. I get it.
It's like, do that for a week.
Go ahead,
how that
try
is.
it, figure it out. But when it's about trans stuff, no. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of, it can show up in your body. And people are very, very particular about what kinds of bodies are okay and not okay. And, for me, I also think that's like not a very adult way of seeing bodies. Like that, like if you live, you're going to have scars. Whatever the scars may be. And maybe they're surgery scars, maybe they're other types of scars. And you're gonna, the way you move through the world, your experiences, they're gonna mark you.
And your body itself is always transitioning. It's changing.
Absolutely. I'm 43 and I can say it's true, and that's like, I don't want it to not be that way, and I think that like, I'd rather have the things that mark my body be, active choices that I made, that I'm actually doing things, that I don't mind, I get a tattoo. That's an active choice and I might regret it. Pointing to a tattoo that I regret as I say that.
Which one is it?
It's like, I don't totally regret it, but it's like a very cheesy, very 90s cheesy compass rose over the world. It's like the equivalent. It's equivalent like a dolphin.
Coexist.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why I said that on national radio.
It's all right. It's relatable.
I do have, I have that very,
As
very
a foot
90s.
tattoo?
It's a foot
Those
tattoo.
are painful. You chose the pain.
I was shaking.
Torrey leans into pain.
I was really, I wanted to be tough for it, but I was like, yeah.
I have no tattoos for this reason.
It hurt, and I have one on my ankle too. Anything over a bone, not
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah. I want us to define this book, but I also want us to define it in a way that gives nothing away.
Oh.
Let's try this together. It is a novel and 3 other stories, or a collection of 4 stories, but each of them deal with someone grappling through the painful questions of who they are and how they present and what their sexuality is too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that a lot of them are about like desire that is they're unable to meet the desire, or they have desire and they don't want their desire. And I think that I'm very interested in that, in the way that those 2 types of desire can lead to things like betrayals, can lead to cruelty, can lead to almost like actually a kind of intimacy, and
I'm
so
thinking
that's
of Listen and Bunyan.
yeah, Babe Bunyan. Yeah. So that's a story that's the longest. It's
Yes.
called Stag Dance.
We're
And
going to set this up for folks because it's a
yeah.
world you have never experienced before.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago in a world of criminal loggers.
Already lost people are lost.
Right?
Criminal loggers.
Criminal loggers who, in the woods, in the midst of snow and blizzard, stage a stag dance. What's a stag dance?
A stag dance is a real thing, and it's
Okay.
like, and it's kind of logical. Like all these men are in the woods for a long time in the winter, and they get lonely, and they decide to put on a dance where some of the men attend the dance as women.
Yeah.
And this happened in like rail camps, it happened in mining camps, it happened in logging camps.
Yeah.
There's like old lithographs of people dancing in the Civil War, like Civil
Really?
War regiments would put on these dances.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
what I found this book, and that loggers would do this thing where they had burlap fabric around a lot because they get their potatoes in sacks and just burlap. They would cut a triangle of burlap fabric, like yay
To
big,
signify
yeah,
another region.
and then they'd hang it over their crotch upside down, and it was like a very obvious vulgar symbol that like, okay, I'm going to the dance as a woman.
Yeah.
But it also, like, I was like, that symbol is so powerful for its like kind of like just obvious vulgar things, but also I was thinking about how like an upside down pink triangles and upside down triangles were, like symbols of homosexuality in the World War II, and then it was like taken up by queerness, and I was like, this is like such an on the nose symbol that I could not use it except for the fact that like the loggers really were doing this back in the day.
Yeah.
So what happens is there's one Babe Bunyan, who's like the biggest
one there.
strongest,
strong like ox.
Very ugly he feels.
Yeah.
He wants to go to the dance as a woman, and he like gets into this rivalry with like, I guess you'd call him like the twink of camp, like the youngest, prettiest logger there, and they end up kind of competing for the boss of the camp, but just the appearance of the big, strong, stereotypical lumberjack.
Yeah.
With the triangle kind of throws the whole camp into disarray.
Exactly. Well, and because it is happening in a time before our current language of transness, all of the feelings of what we might call gender dysphoria, etc., he can't use that language because it's not there. So he has to find what feels like, honestly, a more accessible way of talking about all these questions and feelings.
Yeah,
it's kind of great.
It was incredibly freeing to write this. So the whole thing's written in logger slang.
Which is wild. Didn't know that there's logger slang. I heard
Yeah.
that you found a dictionary of logger slang.
Yeah, it was like from 1941. It was the Children of Loggers, and they like collected all of these phrases. And the phrases are so great. Like there's just so fun to say. Like chewing tobacco is like Scandahoovian dynamite, which like you just want to say like Scandahoovian dynamite. And an egg is a cackleberry because like the hen cackles and it lays eggs and you pick them like berries.
Yeah.
Just like there's so many interesting words, and in a lot of ways like it really freed me up, especially after Detransition Baby. I was kind of like, I don't know how to follow up this.
Yeah.
And then I was like, if I'm just writing in almost like a new
You're
language.
free.
I felt all the expectations were away, and I could discover new things. So like you just mentioned gender dysphoria, you
Yeah.
know, and I like that phrase.
It's so academic. It's so
Yeah,
clinical.
it doesn't. You hear it and you don't feel it. You're not
Uh,
like if I say gender dysphoria, people are like, oh yes,
okay, that's
of
over there.
course, yeah.
I can't touch that. I
But you're
can't
not
feel
like
that.
you know like
Yeah.
oh that's what it like this
Yeah.
like sadness of like of being in some ways, and so to like have the logger say like no mirror has ever befriended me.
That hit me hard.
Yeah. And if you actually think about it like that, like looking in the mirror and having the mirror kind of like insult you every time you look in the mirror and like how that feels,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's actually a much, and I never would use a verb like befriend. Like I don't
Yeah.
walk around being like, he befriended me, but it was like to do it in this logger slang and be like, that is a word that Babe Bunyan would use. And then be like, oh, like that is actually more accurate
Yeah.
to how it feels.
And more human.
Yeah, more human. And so in a certain way, like getting into this logger world and even like complicated stuff that I barely knew how to say in modern language. Like I was thinking about the experience of like, prostheses and, like there's just like the things that you put on your body to make yourself feel good
Yeah.
and how it's like both of your body and not of your body. Like that to me feels like a very trans experience that I only know like really academic words for, like appendage theory or something like that. And it's like to write it as he experiences it was like, oh, that is kind of like the magic of how things become part of us and are us and not us. And like that's like this magic thing that we humans can do. Even something just like glasses, whatever, like they're part of you.
We don't call them appendages. They're just glasses.
They're glasses. But they're like there's magic thing that you see someone with glasses and you're like, that's a part of that person.
Yep.
Yeah. And like, trans people they put things on themselves. We put things on ourselves to like feel a way.
Yeah.
And like how does that happen? Well, I don't even know how to say it, but I do know how to now say it as a logger.
Yeah.
And like there's a whole scene in there that was like I was discovering something as I was describing this in logger language.
Yeah.
Something about my own experience.
Yeah. So then I wonder, I think it's fair to say that both of us think that some of the language around gender, identity, and transness is extremely clinical and academic.
Yeah.
Does the current state of language around this discourse do an actual disservice to all of us and trans people?
I think it has its place.
Okay.
Like, I think that like, if you're applying for insurance money or something like that, like sure, use a clinical diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
But if you're trying to like tell somebody how you deeply feel, and you want them to like have empathy, you want to resonate with them, then it's not the right place for it. And what ends up happening is that we're like constantly sort of deferring to institutions to give us like legitimacy.
Yeah.
Where it's like, listen, I have gender dysphoria. Like the hospital said so. You can't argue with me, right? Like that's kind of like that argument is like contained in the language.
Yes.
And actually it's like it's not effective because
when has over the history of humankind hospitals and the medical industry been kind to trans people?
No. And these institutions, like they're, we talked about the moment right now anyway, the institutions are failing us and turning against us. Oof. So I don't want to be using language that defers to them in my daily practice.
What's the thing? I'm going to butcher it. One cannot burn down the master's house with the master's tools.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that this is like, speaking of the moments of opportunity that we talked about, like this is a moment to basically, I think over the last 10 years, there's been, trans people have had some success with institutions. Yeah. Just recently, like the NEA said that no DEI, no gender ideology can be given NEA grants, which basically translates to, in my case, like, we're not going to give any grants to trans people or about trans stuff. Even though we pay taxes to pay for the NEA grants.
Yeah. Then this is the National Endowment for the Arts.
Sorry, yes, exactly. Yeah. National Endowment for Arts. And so I can hear that and I can be like, that's discriminatory. That's messed up. Or I can kind of be like, I didn't need the National Institute for the Arts or Endowment for the Arts anyway.
What are the strings attached?
Right. And also like, what can I actually do with my friends? How can I self-publish stuff? Like, who am I actually trying to address? I just want to address the people that need to hear it. I don't need to triangulate it through the National Endowment of the Arts. I can just find the people that need to hear it. And I got my start self-publishing.
Yeah.
I wrote like the equivalent of zines.
Yeah.
And I gave them away for free on the internet.
Yeah.
And they got to the people that needed to hear them. Maybe I didn't make as much money as if I had done it through like the NEA or whatever. But to me, that's like that's actually where like a lot of incredible art flourishes.
Yeah.
And they're to actually remember, like, we don't need these institutions.
Exactly.
And we can actually talk to each other. Like, that to me is actually the potential and the power of the moment.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like what you're saying in these different ways of thinking about queerness and transness within the larger culture, it feels like the difference between the way we talked about gay marriage when that was ascendant and the way we talk about queer rights and trans rights now. So much of the energy around gay marriage was, we're just like you. Don't you love us? We're just like you.
Yeah.
We're not. We have kids and spouses and houses in the suburbs just like you. And that worked for that. But now we're in this moment in which queer people and trans people are saying, we're not like you, and like, would you just leave us alone?
Well, it's interesting, like, though, we're not like you and we are like you, like, because I totally agree with you. But the thing is to say, like, in like gay marriage, to basically be like, we're just like you. That's true. I agree with that. Like, I don't think the desire around queerness is like really any different than any other sort of desire.
Attraction.
It's attraction, right?
Yeah.
So we are just like you. But it's not so much that like we have houses in the suburbs and stuff like that. It's like, actually, you're freaky just like us. Like that
you're just
is
like us.
That is the thing, and I think that's what they're scared of. Is that like actually they have like all the same desires, they have all the same unruliness, all the
gay men aren't the only ones who want open marriage.
Exactly, and like all that kind of thing, and so there's a thing where I am like, on the one hand I'm like, I don't want to be like, we're like capitulating, where I'm like, we're just like you, and we're safe.
Yeah.
It's not like that we're safe. It's like
no one's safe.
You're dangerous like us.
Woof.
And I want people to do that because I think that'll make a freer world.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So then, do you want people who hate trans people to read this book?
I mean, literally, I was just in an Uber here and I was talking to this guy and he was like really friendly, nice guy. And he wanted to show me a picture of his daughter. And, he showed me the picture of the daughter, but he like slipped with his thumb, and it was like a picture of him at a Trump rally. And I was like, and then like the next thing he asked me, he was like asking where am I going? I was on my way here, and I was like, well, I've got an interview, I got a book. And he was like, what's the name of your book? And I almost gave him a fake name of my book,
Really?
Because I was like, like, what do you look? And then I was like, no, I'm not like ashamed of the book I wrote. I'm not scared of this guy,
What's he gonna do? Yeah. He wants a tip.
So yeah, exactly. So, and he's not going to read it while he's driving, so it's fine. But, I think that there's like moments where like someone is like, what did you write? And I'm like, okay, here we go. And that can be like tiring on a personal level. But I think that like, I want people who think that they're going to hate this book to read it. And if they can read it with just even a modicum of good faith, like you don't need all the good faith, just like just a little bit. Huh. And if you're not just looking for like pull quotes to use against me, but you're actually reading it as a story, and then you reject it, go for it. Yeah. Like, and I'd rather even have like the intelligent discussions with somebody who has read this work and is like rejecting it because on like its merits. That's like a kind of like, that's an honorable way of sending me away, and I can take it. But I just, anyone who does that, tell me all the ways that I'm wrong.
There's a thing you said in some other interviews that like some of the harshest and most pointed cruelty can only be born of intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, in my first book, I was thinking a lot about like mother-daughters, but in this one, I was thinking a lot about sisters and the way that like sisters that's your kin, that's the person who looks like you. And that also means that's the person who knows where you came from and like sees through you, sees that you're like, sees your transparency, see the ways that you're trying and failing that maybe other people don't see. Yeah. And that means that like she can hurt you. And, I think that like the best sister stories, like going back to like, Little Women or something, are like love stories, but like rivalries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of potency is something that I was like working out with, even like the lumberjacks, right? Like the actual, sure, they're like guys in the woods, but like the emotions between Lisa and Babe Bunyan for me are sisterly emotions. And they would, like, the strange thing was them recognizing, like, we're logging men.
Yeah.
And basically like, but we're sisterly in this way, and that too is like these emotions, they circulate in places where they're not just like in families.
Exactly.
They're amongst all of us in all these different ways.
Has doing that kind of work and thinking about relationships and the dynamic between intimacy and cruelty, has it changed the way you navigate your friendships and relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think I used to be like, I think I used to be like more of like a know-it-all with my friends, like partially because with my friends we were transparent to each other.
Yeah.
I could be like, oh, I see what you're doing, like and you're trying to do this and you should do it this way because I see what you're trying to do and you should,
Yeah.
And I've had to sort of like basically be like, even though I think I know, even though that person seems transparent to me, like, and I'm convinced that I know what's going on, just like, shut up, Torrey. Just like, don't say anything. And oftentimes when I do, I'm surprised, like I'm able to be surprised by what people do, even if they are kind of transparent to me.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the stuff that I'm saying too about this, it's true. And, I'm trying to like build into myself and in some ways to my writing, like a capacity for not knowing. Like a lot of these characters, they
have more questions than answers.
Yeah. And I think what makes them interesting is that they don't have it all figured out. They don't have the language for it a lot of times. They don't have the answers. And I have been trying to a little bit go back to that myself, to basically be like, sure, I've read all the theory. I have, been around trans people for a long time, think I know, but like, what if I just like went back to like not a little bit of not knowing, and I think writing this sort of thing and thinking about this stuff has taught me some humbleness and basically being like, my weakness is thinking I know when I don't. Yeah.
Let's talk about what this book could do for cis people who read it.
Yeah.
There's something you said, I want to say to Elle magazine. You said that you're hoping people can look at transness as less of an identity and more of an invitation. And it felt like that invitation could be specifically meaningful for cisgendered people. What does that invitation in an ideal world for a reader look and feel like?
Yeah, let me like explain some context around that.
Yeah.
Which is that like I think there has been like a kind of story of like how one arrives at transness. That like, oh, you felt away as a kid, and then you could maybe play with like dolls, and then you told your parents, and they said no, and then et cetera. You got hormones, and now you're here. And that there's some like uniform and consistent like inner feeling amongst all trans people,
with the landing point.
Yeah, with both the landing point and even what drives them.
Yes.
Like, oh, I was born in the wrong body or whatever. Like there's some feeling. And in fact, that like that's not at all what I've experienced. People like, some people have that story. Other people are like, I had a fetish and I like explored the fetish a lot, and I realized like, oh, the fetish wasn't actually a fetish. It was like a warning signal that I should transition. Other people were like, woke up one day, thought it was what I should do. And that is alien to me.
Yeah.
But I have definitely met trans people who are like, that's how I did it. And like the thing is, however, like, I don't understand that.
That's your journey.
But now you're standing in the same general square as me.
Yeah.
And I have your back. I don't understand your back, but I have your back. And like, and that the thing is, if I don't understand it, but I still am just like trans then becomes like a name for people I'm standing with, people who I have solidarity with.
Yeah.
And once I say I don't need to understand it, I don't need to your journey doesn't have to be the same as mine.
Yeah.
I just need to stand with you. Then there's no reason that you have to use particular words either.
Huh.
You know, that if someone's like, it was like with my first book with like divorced cis women, where I felt like the journey that divorced cis women had gone through was very, that journey of divorce, of realizing that you don't want your life to look away and making a big decision. I relate to that.
Yeah.
And if at the end you're coming to a place where you're like, I'm going to live my life intentionally, I'm going to try and figure out who I am, try and figure out who I want to be and how I want people to see me, well, that's close enough for me, you know? And so like, when I say trans is an invitation, I'm not saying like, go shoot some testosterone or something like that. And I invite you to come over and do it with me. I mean, like, think about what you want and prize that freedom. And if you prize that freedom, then stand with me. You know, that's all it is for me. Like, and I don't really care about arbitrary lines of, well, you have to do this, you have to do that. You know, to me, it is, I mean, freedom is like I think it's like a word that's been like co-opted by the right. But actually, I think the freedom that I'm interested in is like realizing something's going to be hard, deciding to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And making that happen for yourself.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
I want to stand with it. I want to stand with people who do that.
I've been telling folks, for me, especially these days, we think of freedom as a place, but in actuality, freedom is just a new set of unanswered questions.
I love that. Yeah. I'm going to steal that from you.
You can have it. But it's like, if that is what trans is about, the pursuit of freedom, and if that is just a series of questions, anyone who's ever questioned can identify and stand with.
Yeah, stand with. And, you know, and the idea that there's like a beginning or end to asking questions. Like, you're like, well, I've asked all the questions I want to ask.
Never.
You know, it's like, well,
Yeah.
okay, well, I guess you're just sit on the couch for the rest of your life. You
Yeah.
know, it's an ongoing thing. And like that freedom is like an ongoing thing too. Yeah.
You've said that your experience has been a, quote, never ending transition. What does that mean?
I mean, it's like I think that when I first, I mean, I'm literally wearing a suit right now, you know, and it's like, that's new to me. It's actually like, I went on tour last time and I wore always the same flowered dress because it was like, it was
I remember that dress, actually.
Yeah. It was like in all my photos. And partially it was like a defense mechanism that was like, if you take a picture of me in the flowered dress, I look the same as I do in my press photos, but the press photo is a lot better. So just use the press photo, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like people were always trying to get me to not wear that dress a little bit, so that they could take pictures of me in which I look trans. Like that was like I went to Europe and like they were always looking for like the clockiest pictures of me to basically be like, yeah, this trans woman like came here. They wanted the readers to like look at me that way. And I was like, okay, like, well, there's actually already a thing that exists for wearing the same thing over and over. And it's like a suit. That's what a suit is. And also, if you take a picture of me and I look clocky in a suit, well,
it's a suit.
I'm wearing a suit, you know? But I was like terrified to wear anything that was like menswear inspired for a long time. And I would have been, I think, like uncomfortable with it 2 years ago. I would have been like, I don't want to wear anything that's like, you know, got pads in the shoulders or whatever. And now it feels like I've been wearing it this tour and I've been feeling like super powerful.
It's a good suit.
Thank you so much.
It's a good suit.
Andrea Longtree roasted me in this suit. You know,
I read that write-up of it.
Yeah, she was like, what was her good one? Her good one was a surprise guest at a business casual gender reveal. That was a good one. She had a bunch of them. And you know, the blue. But yeah, I don't know. Like, to kind of bring it back to your question, it's like that journey of like, how do I want to present myself? How do I feel? Like, you know, there wasn't like an endpoint where like, now I'm a woman and I know what to wear and I know how to be and I know all this stuff. It's like, I'm going in and out of it. Just like all of the cis women I know who are like, maybe they were femme when they were like 20 and now they're like wearing Carhartts or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like they're moving around.
It's so
all
true.
the time.
I mean, I was questioning myself last night thinking about this conversation, and I was like, well, Sam, what has your gender journey been? I've always identified as a cis man, but my presentation of gender has changed as I've aged.
Yeah.
When I was young, I had a very delicate and frail body. Small, thin, light bones. My parents called me Bird because my wrists were so small. I was slight. My voice was high. And I looked like a boy, but I felt light.
Yeah.
And the older I've gotten, my body has broadened. My voice has lowered. I went bald, which was a very male ID kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I grew a beard. And then the beard got gray. And so I found that just as a side effect of age,
Yeah.
my gender presentation has shifted. And I've had to really think about that because I didn't ask for it, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love how I look now.
And I bet also you do things, you make choices around it, right?
Oh,
like
yeah, I want to keep it up.
Yeah. And like, like a sweater that you're like, if I looked a different way before, I wouldn't feel right in that sweater.
Yeah.
Now I feel good in this sweater.
Exactly.
Now I want to do this. I want to do
wear
that.
T-shirts now because my arms filled out.
Exactly.
You know?
And like those are that is it. It's like age is a transition. Whatever, you take hormones as a transition. Miranda July's book that's like all about
fours.
all fours.
Ripped me wide open.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like she's on the same. Well, the character, the narrator, is on the same hormones that I'm
but
on.
the characters.
Yeah.
We know.
It's like she got to an age, and now like as a trans woman, and for her a perimenopausal woman, like we're both taking our estrogen, and it's like changing how we want to go to the gym, how we want to do this, how we do. It's all. It's like that was absolutely a transition book.
Oh, totally. Totally. I cannot help but think about the way transness and writing about it and immersing readers in a world of it, how much it has to be negotiated within our current political context. This book is four worlds that are not America right now, but we're reading this book in an America right now in which transness is such a fraught issue and in which our politics just feels so, if not broken, at least quite disjointed. And I was thinking about how to apply this lens of transness and of questioning that's in the book to our politics. And it just hit me last night. And I was like, oh my God. When I think about how you're defining transness as an invitation or a series of questionings or a kind of dissatisfaction, America feels very trans right now.
Yeah.
Like collectively.
Yeah.
America is working through its identity as a country.
Yeah.
And questioning that in so many ways, on the left and the right. And in many ways, the way in which Donald Trump wants America to be seen, or the left or the right wants America to be seen, that version we want people to see of us is not the version the world is seeing right now, and not even the version that we see of ourselves right now. Is it fair to say, that America's politics in this current moment is actually hella trans?
I mean, I think that might be why it's at the center of policy right now. Is that it becomes a metaphor for what America's going through. And that's why everybody's so upset about it. Is that basically like there's a sense that like, yeah, we feel this and it is us and it is like kind of apt to the moment. Like, I'm trying to write this new book and I feel like there are all these connections between things like transness and crypto or like, like things that you wouldn't think about. Like you were just talking about how the trans on the internet and performance on the internet, and you have to just believe in these things that you can't see.
Yeah, that's crypto.
That's crypto. That's like all these things, and that like actually there is like a web of meanings that are like connecting all of these things that are like very I start sounding paranoid, like I'm pointing to the board of like this is connected to this and it's conspiratorial, but like there's a way in which they all are connected somehow. And I think like that's kind of what fiction is supposed to do is like there's too many connections. It's too diffuse for anybody to like hold in their head. And the job of a fiction writer is kind of like find a story that like
we can latch onto.
That you can latch onto, that you can feel the connection somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of like what I am working on now. Is like, how are these connections? Can they be captured in a story? Mm-hmm. What is the story for this moment? Mm-hmm. And it's also so hard because it takes 3 years to write a novel, and it's like, is it going to even be the same connections? Everything's changing so much, but I think that's what like really the great novels that like I aspire to are things that like can grab and like hold in place in a story the weird and diffuse connections of like a moment for a little while. Yeah. And I think that I don't actually think it's just like random bigotry necessarily. There's a bunch of random bigotry, but it's not only random bigotry. That transness is so central to how so many people in the country are, I want to say like fearing. They're not thinking, but they're fearing right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're fearing living in the complexity that they think transness introduces, not knowing that they've already been living in the complexity.
Yeah, and they don't want to. It's scary to like kind of have to see it. You know, to like give up the narrative that things are simple.
Yeah, it's like when a fish discovers it's in water. What do you mean?
The fish is like I've been trans this whole time.
Yes. Oh, I love this. I have like 30 more questions, but we're not going to do that because we've hit time, and I think we've gotten all of it out there, all the good stuff. I mean, I just want to say it's been a while since I've had any piece of pop culture that makes me truly ignore my bedtime. I love that feeling, whether it's a show or an album or a movie or a book, where you say to yourself, I can't go to bed yet. I need more of this. Your book gave me that, so thank you.
Well, I thank you also for including it as pop culture. You know, I think a lot of times books like this, like they get sort of shunted to like a kind of like literary stodginess. And I'm like, you know, you were talking about Tom Cruise, I think last week, and it's like, obviously it's like incredibly flattering to go on after a conversation about Tom Cruise, but also it's like, I write these books to be entertaining, and other authors are writing them to be entertaining. Not we're talking about these big issues, but like ultimately you want to give a good story, have a good time, bring up some emotions, and that like that is kind of like the meat of the kind of writer I want to be. So like, thank you for seeing it and also inviting me on in that context.
I love it. Listen, stay weird.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep writing weird shit.
I couldn't not if I wanted to.
Torrey, we ask all of our guests to actually sign a beach ball. We've got one next to you with the Sharpie. Amazing. Will you sign it as we say goodbye?
Yes, please.
And I will tell folks again to check out both of your books. Detransition Baby is the first novel. Stag Dance is the second, a collection of 4 stories. I need both of these things to be movies or series.
Please. Anyone out there, please.
Oh, this was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the book tour. I love the suit.
Thanks.
Yeah.